So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's Soil Network of Knowledge webinar on soil data access to inform soil carbon management. I'll start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the soils and lands on which we are. For me, that's the Gamilaroi people in Narrabri, and show my respect to elders past, present, and thank them for teaching me about the soils we stand on. So welcome to the webinar. Like I said, the topic today is soil data access to inform soil carbon management. And it's going to be presented by Peter Dahlhaus from Fed Uni and Brian Jenkins and Linda Henderson from New South Wales DCCEEW. This webinar is brought to you by New South Wales DPIRD Soils Unit and the Southern New South Wales Innovation Hub. The webinar series is part of a community of interest around soil. Look out for our other products such as the All the Dirt newsletter, which you may like to subscribe to. If you're listening but are not a subscriber, the link to subscribe to the monthly webinar invitation is here. You can also forward your invitation to others. The Soils Unit is now on Twitter, and this is our handle. My name is Blake Palmer, and I'm a Soils Research and Development Officer with New South Wales DPIRD, and I'm a Regional Soil Coordinator with the Southern New South Wales Innovation Hub. Now, I'd like to introduce Felicity Harrop, who is the Knowledge Broker with the Soil CRC, and she'll introduce today's speakers.
By the Soil CRC, supported by the New South Wales Government as part of the Primary Industries Productivity and Abatement Program, supporting land managers. PIPUP is providing information to land managers about carbon farming to help them make evidence-based decisions. I'd like to introduce our presenters in the order of the presentations. Firstly, Associate Professor Peter Dahlhaus, a Principal Research Fellow at Federation University and a Soil CRC Project Leader, will demonstrate accessing relevant soil data using Soil CRC's Visualising Australasia's Soils online data portal. Peter's career spans 40 years in engineering, geology, environmental geology and hydrology, and with his colleagues at Federation University's Centre for E-Research and Digital Innovation, CERDI, Peter's current research focuses on spatial data interoperability and visualisation to ensure that environmental data, information and knowledge are globally and publicly available. Our second presenter, Brian Jenkins, a senior team leader with Soil and Land Assessment Team within the New South Wales DCCEEW, will present soil information in New South Wales and how to find it. Brian has many years of experience and has been instrumental in the collection of New South Wales soil and landscape data, which can be found in state and national databases such as New South Wales Seed, the central resource for sharing and enabling environmental data in New South Wales, and New South Wales eSPADE. Over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks, Felicity, and welcome everyone. The Visualising Australasia's Soils project, known as VAS, is a rather ambitious research project funded by the Soil CRC. It started in 2019 and has been funded through to 2027 when the Soil CRC ends. The research aims to implement a soil data federation of both public sector and private sector data. The participants in the project are shown on the screen and comprise research organisations and farmer groups and catchment managers. The project's evolved over 3 phases. The first phase was to work out what was required and build on the technical system to suit. So that was a sort of a development stage, if you like. The second stage then was to test it out. So this is the phase that we're just concluding at the moment. This second phase has been about a 3-year project, and it's really to understand more of the value propositions that are required to make this thing work. The third stage will be how to make this federation enduring beyond the life of the CRC. The aspirations of the project really are to motivate Australian and New Zealand soil data custodians to make their data more findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. It's called FAIR data. It's something that's taken off globally, especially in Europe and in North America. and provides a range of benefits for agricultural research and policy development. There's a growing volume of really good, freely available, globally available soil data resources, soil information and data resources. Shown on screen are just a few of them. There are many, many, many more of these. The challenge in this research is to find its place within this data ecosystem, this soil data ecosystem, and bring the benefits of all this soil data and information to practical and pragmatic use for the participants in the project. The way this has evolved has been to build an online soil data aggregator, shown in this bit here as this CRC observation systems component that allows project participants to upload their data through a self-serve system. And that self-serve system generates metadata and maps their data to international data interoperability standards. These are based on the Global Geospatial Consortium, which is an international organisation, their observations and measurements data scheme, which is also an international standard, an ISO standard. So once the data is loaded up, it's hidden from public view and can only be seen by the data custodians via a login into this back of the system, if you like. The soil data owners or custodians can elect, if they wish, to share the data, and there are a variety of ways to do that, such as fuzzying up the locations or implementing embargoes for a time period, and so on. The system also brings in open data from other sources, such as the Soil and Landscape Grid of Australia or the state data. At the moment, the system's got around 200,000 observations. These, by that I mean soil test parameters, soil test properties, collected from around 11,000 soil samples taken over about 3,000 sites. There are about 11 farmer groups and 4 catchment managements and 2 universities that have loaded their data into this system. Around 10,000 of those are soil carbon observations that have been collected using 13 different ways to measure soil carbon, so 13 different procedures. About half of those, or more than half of those, are using the Walkley and Black common procedure called procedure 6A1 in that, and there's a bunch of other procedures that are in there as well. A lot of the data is clumped down around our territory, down in Victoria, although the largest contributor is actually a contributor up in North Queensland, and the second largest is in West Australia. That is, contributors of the number of soil data observations. These data include, as well as the soil properties, these data include soil moisture probe observations for southern Victoria and northern Tasmania. They amount to well over 600 million observations of soil moisture and temperature records over time. There's good soil data good soil carbon data being collected in New South Wales, but it hasn't yet been uploaded into the system. The public portal, which is accessible from the Soil CRC website, and Felicity will put the address in the chat box, is a place where you can find a lot more information. And so it has a selection of open soil data that's interoperably served from other systems. So for example, here, this is the National Soil Classification and you've also got the New South Wales soil series data, and these just come from national or state publicly open data systems. The soil properties for New South Wales are included in there. So these are the digital soil maps that come from the New South Wales DPI. And they include, of course, organic carbon layers for the topsoil shown here, or for the subsoil, as well as lots of other soil property layers, such as pH and percentage clay and so on. And it also shows the soil, the location of the soil data sites for New South Wales on the VAS portal. But if you're looking for these, I'd encourage you to go through eSPADE and Salus, and other things that Brian will tell you about in the next bit, because we don't have full access to these data. In the near future, all of these data should be made available through ANSYS, the Australian National Soil Information System, which was launched in last year, but is improving all the time. And the way to get to that is ansys.net on the web. And so it'll be the location where most of the Commonwealth and state and publicly available data will be available through. Now, as I said, there's not a lot of soil carbon data shared for New South Wales. Now that's not to say that it's not being collected. There's very good quantities of excellent, really good quality soil carbon data collected in New South Wales by some of the farmer groups who are participating in the project, and some of it's been uploaded into the VAS aggregator. But the data custodians haven't shared this, so I don't have permission to show those publicly. But there is, excellent stuff. But you can see some of the functionality within the system if I use the Victorian data. So some of the Victorian participants in the project have elected to share their data, and here's an example. This example I'm showing on screen here comes from the Corangamite region, where there are 101 soil health monitoring sites that have been regularly sampled. So the Corangamite Catchment Management Authority owns the data, controls the data. The data has been collected by Southern Farming Systems, the farmer group in that particular area. At the request of the data custodian, the exact locations are not publicly shared, but they're shown by randomly positioning the exact location in a polygon that's 2 kilometres by 2 kilometres that you can see on the screen there, so that it kind of fuzzies up the location, but still allows you to sort of see the trends, if you like. Of course, the data custodian, when they log in, they've got the exact locations, but it's just for public control, privacy, if you like. They haven't elected to show that. But these data, can be then filtered. So you can filter these data on things like depth, on time, on observed property, on procedure and method, and it'll then filter those data. And you can see here, I've just filtered the Walkleyan black soil carbon data, and they're just distributed with a colour schema here from 0.5% through to 6%, shown by different colours. And then you can download these data. You can also then see trends, of course, so graph up trends over time. So in this case here, we've got a particular site where the data has been collected on 3 occasions from 2015, 18 and 2023. And here is the Walkley and Black soil carbon collected in 2015 and 2018, graphed up as a trend over time. And you can also then graph these up down profile as well, if you've got the data, of course. So this is organic carbon and CECs, cation exchange capacity, shown down the profile. And then we've also included data statistics, so you can, for the whole data set, or for, in fact, the whole of the region, you can collect data statistics, and these data statistics are just shown here as, you know, your basic statistical parts. The thing to point out here is that, you know, the reason why this data is, you know, of value, if you like, is because it's been mapped to international standards. It's linked to controlled vocabularies and controlled procedures, which are meaning that they're controlled by a community. And it's also linked to the international units, measurement units as well, so that these data are, you know, very well curated, unambiguously described, and that makes them very useful for, you know, transferring into applications like crop and pasture models, or artificial intelligence, machine learning models, or anything like that. So it makes them very reusable, these data, and very useful. So what's the value proposition? I mean, why would you bother doing this? You know, well, the sales pitch for this whole thing is that better data leads to better decisions. You know, data, when structured, becomes information, which, you know, when tied into scientific laws and everything, becomes knowledge. You act on that knowledge, and then you get an outcome, and from that outcome you learn and you grow the wisdom. So that's, you know, better data is better decisions, but it also provides an evidence base, and it provides an evidence base for things like proof of soil stewardship, for carbon neutrality, nature positive, all that sort of stuff, and for compliance, you know, that you may need to demonstrate if for marketing your products, or for you know, environmental, you know, right to farm, all that sort of stuff. So just on this last slide, you know, it's often said that data's the new oil, and you know, with that, what makes the data a commodity, you know, that funds some of the biggest corporations like Google and Meta, is the fact that it fuels their analysis engines, especially artificial intelligence engines. And in agriculture, if we're to benefit from this, we need to have good fuel. So good data is good fuel, you know, garbage in, garbage out, and all that. And so, you know, very strongly, the intention of this project anyway is to provide higher quality soil data. So that's it from me. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. I'll just quickly note while we're going, the links reference to ANSYS and VAS have been pasted into the chat box. I'll also just point out that in the handouts pane, there's 3 PDF documents there that you'll be able to download if you wish. So I'll pass it over to you now, BJ, if I can, which I can. So you're the panelist and in control now, BJ, so share at your heart's content.
Okay, thanks, Blake. Can you see the presentation?
Yep, perfect, mate.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and thanks, Peter, as well. Yeah, so our system is SALIS, which is Soil and Land Information System. So this is This is a New South Wales government system, and it basically starts at the dawn of time as far as the web goes. We started with a soil data system last millennium, so we've had a soil data system one shape or form. Like I said, if you're talking about the web, since the dawn of time. So we're the Soil and Landscape Assessment Team, and we're in the very confusing because we've got the same name as the Federal Environment Department. So we're the New South Wales DCCEEW. And we do things like soil description, we do soil landscape mapping, we do land and soil capability. So our thing is we collect information, but we also take others' information and we put it into our system, and we hold and store the data and make it publicly available where we can. We also try and do value adding as much as possible, so people have got interpretive products around data. And we also try and make our data publicly available to other systems such as PETAS, such as ANZUS, such as TURN, and also the New South Wales Environmental Data Portal, which is called SEED. Another thing we do is we try and follow, wherever possible, we try and follow standards. So you'll see on the screen, if I can click the right button, you'll see on the screen now a little picture there, which I think will be familiar to a lot of you, which is the Australian Soil and Land Survey field book. So we use that as a standard for a lot of our data, and we follow things like the Australian Soil Classification and so on. So we try to follow recognised standards wherever possible in terms of our data that's in our system. I've sort of deviated a little bit. I put, why collect the data here? And I think this is important because this really informs what we have in our data system. So obviously there's productivity, but being an environment department, we're also very interested in, the sustainability and the eco-health type thing, and particularly soil health. We're really interested in soil moisture, and we're interested in the water cycle because soil is such a key component to the water cycle. The water moves over, it moves through the soil, it provides moisture to plants and so on. So it also drives a lot of our degradation, whether it be sheet gully erosion or salinity. So we're really interested in that water movement through soil. We're interested obviously in climate change. It's sort of you could almost say, who isn't these days? Climate change is such a big direction for any of us doing agriculture or any of us working in the environment. We also think soil is key to future-proofing Australia. It's key to disaster management, and it's key to recovery. Another thing there that most people don't appreciate, I think, and until it's pointed out to them, is soil is one of Australia's greatest assets, and we need to value and appreciate that it is of such an asset to us. So some basic principles. So I mentioned before, we follow Australian standards. We also have a number of methodologies and things that we've implemented, and we've done this for a number of reasons. I'll give the example here of the Land and Soil Capability Scheme. It's actually now incorporated into a number of New South Wales legislations, whether it be the Crown Lands Act or it be into the mine concept. We have that Land and Soil Capability Scheme that we derived, incorporated into legislation, and we make sure whenever we have any methodology that we've developed that we use or put up into our system, that it has some sort of methodology, some sort of protocol, some sort of documentation around what is happening, and that includes eSPADE, which is our data portal that hangs off our database, Salus. Another principle for us is to make data publicly available wherever we can. So obviously that's got to be with the permission of the data owners. We don't consider ourselves data owners. We are merely the custodians of the data. We hold the data. We don't consider ourselves the owner of the data. So here's a little, for those of you that like the sort of pictorial representations, We have eDirt, which is our data entry tool for soil profile type information. Data comes into the system and it's stored in SALIS, which is the database we have. And once again, that stands for the Soil and Land Information System. Then it then goes out to a number of portals. So our own portal is called eSPADE, but we consciously made a decision that we're going to make data, because once again, we don't consider ourselves the owner of the data, merely custodians, make it available to as many portals as we can. So that includes ANZUS, that includes Peter's FAS system, that also includes SEED, it includes things like Turn. And recently you'll see down in the bottom right hand corner there, it says the Soils Near Me, which is an app. So you can search for Soils Near Me in your app store and it comes up with a version of eSPADE. It doesn't have as much information as eSPADE, but allows you to have a little app there where you can instantly see what your soil is wherever you are in the state. So eSPADE, our data portal, it's an internet spatial viewer. It's easy to find. You can in the chat, I think Felicity has put the link to it, or you can just search for eSPADE New South Wales and it will come up. And you'll get a screen like this and you'll get a legend on the right. So I think getting into it's fairly easy, but where people may fall down is sort of navigating through the legend. So the first thing is you've got the base maps. You can select what type of base map you want. There's a few options there. I won't read them out. And then you see up the top of the legend, it's got soil profiles, so that's our soil point information. And there's over 62,000 of those publicly available. So you get 62,000 dots over New South Wales. You've got to scroll down a bit to get when they start to pop up. And then you can do some simple things with them to colour them up to tell you various information. Here we've clicked on field pH topsoil, and you'll see the bottom right hand corner, it's got soil profiles and it lists what the ranges are and what the colours mean. If you look at the dot that I've got circled there in black, we click on that, and we could do that for any of these 62,000, and we'll come up with various report options. So each one of those 62,000 soil profiles has three different report options that you can click on. In this case, I'm clicking on profile, and it comes up, in this case, with a soil profile report. And that's got site details, and then it's got layer descriptions. If there's lab data available, that will be shown, and you'll see down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's also carbon information, which is of relevance to today's talk. And as Peter alluded to, the data that's usually, the test that's usually done is the Walkley-Black method. Also point out that some of our data is historical, goes back to the 50s. We've had a number of goes at collecting historical data and getting it incorporated into the system. Most recently, the feds, the Commonwealth through DAF very kindly provided money for us to do further trawls, and we added a substantial number of profiles in the last year, which were effectively historical profiles, which we're really pleased to see added to the system and made available publicly. Oh, it's not going to let me click. So that's the first type of information we have, which is that point source data. The second type of information I'm going to talk about is we have this polygonal data. So lines drawn a map, and basically usually going back in the day through air photo interpretation and done at various scales. Now this information is available. You can go in there and you can click on a polygon. You can then ask to show that particular landscape on the map. And here we've got it's Yeovil soil landscape, and we've clicked on it. We've asked us to highlight it and map, and you can see part of that shown there in the red. Next, if we click on the view report, it comes up with a detailed soil landscape report. And it's got a whole host of information there. I'm not going to go through the soil landscape report. I really urge you to go into the system, have a play around if you haven't done so, and look at the soil landscapes and see what is available. There's a whole host of soil information about this particular soil landscape. One of the most useful things, I think, is cross-section diagrams, which show how within that soil landscape, different soil types relate to each other and then relate to the landscape in which they sit. And we then try and do some interpretive stuff with the soil landscapes, do things like various capabilities, then have things like, recommendations around sustainable land use, etc., that relate specifically to that particular soil landscape. You can click on and off various layers on eSPADE using the legend. Okay, and in this one, we're looking at a statewide presentation of grade soil groups. Click that on, and we can turn on the land and soil capability for across the state. You'll also see in the legend there, I haven't put a slide particularly for this, but there's various model soil properties. So if you click on that, it lists a whole range of modeled soil layers, most of which have been generated for us by a gentleman called John Gray. As far as soil carbon goes, there's a lot of information in there that's relevant. If you go into the model soil layers, there's 3 carbon options: carbon concentration, carbon mass, carbon stocks. You click on those boxes. So if I click on the first one, the soil carbon concentration, it will then drop down to various layers you can look at for the soil organic carbon concentration. And it's the same for the organic carbon mass. Click on that and it will open up a number of different layers you can click on and see across the state. And once again, for the soil carbon stocks. I think another layer that's very useful for carbon is the land use layer. We follow the ALUM scheme, which is ABARES administers, and members of our department are on working groups with ALUM, so we keep up with that system, and we try and keep updated maps available, as well as some of the historical maps for comparison's sake available for land use. Also, the various other model layers there that may have been useful. The laboratory test results you've seen available for the soil profiles. We've got things like organic carbon, and the land and soil capability I also think is of use when taken in conjunction with various other carbon metrics. Come on. We also have some soil monitoring set up, and we also have protocols around soil monitoring. And with the soil monitoring stations that we did set up, there is carbon measures. So I think that's worth mentioning, and that information is available. I mentioned once again seed, that's another data set, and I brought that up here because if you go into seed, you can actually download all our line work. So all that polygonal line work I said, you can download that and you can use it as a layer in whatever work you're trying to generate as well. So it's not just the soil profiles information that's available, it's all our line work. Okay, that's it for me.
Thanks very much for that, Brian. I will take your power away from you and take control as the panelist again. And then I'm going to open it up to questions, which I see there is already a couple of questions loaded up. So the first question comes from Lisa Lobry de Bruin, and she's asked, when was eSPADE first developed? Do you have an answer for that one? Maybe BJ?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. So I think it goes back to the 1990s, and it wasn't called eSPADE, it was called the Soil Data System initially. I'm not sure when it converted to being eSPADE. I think that was roughly about 12 years ago. It went from being the Soil Data System to eSPADE, because as the technologies evolved, we've tried to move forward as much as we can. But yeah, like I said, I think it was back in about 95 when we first started the Soil Data System.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. Just to reiterate to everyone, you have two mechanisms to ask questions. One, you can raise your hand, or two, you can type in the questions pane. I'll just point out again that 3 handouts for this webinar have been uploaded to the handouts page, and I've put 3 links during Brian's talk, one to eSPADE, one to SEED, and also the email address for soils@environment.nsw.gov.au into the chat. So the next question we've got is from Adam O'Toole, who, Adam, I might unmute you, mate. You'll have to unmute yourself to speak. Adam's asked, can organisations not involved in the soil CRC from before add new data? So I'm thinking that's probably a question directed towards Peter.
Yep. So did you want to ask that question, Adam, or?
Yeah, that was the question, I guess. Yeah, can others upload data? If they want to?
Yeah. So it's a frequent question we get. So at the moment, the participants within the soil CRC have had obviously first dibs at helping construct the system and working with it. The phase we're about to enter, which is the 3rd phase, we have to look at how we're going to try and make the system endure after the soil CRC finishes in 2027. So obviously for that to happen, we're going to have a mechanism to get others involved. Now, we already collect a lot of other soil data in other projects we do within our research organisation here for example, we run online farm trials for GRDC, and we also do a lot of work with precision agriculture, with other farmer groups and so on. So there's an awful lot of, we have, huge knowledge of what data is out there and what's available, and we'd love to see it all within the VAS. And so I guess that'll happen in the next couple of years. If you've got soil data and you want to be part of VAS, I'd suggest strongly that you, contact us, and we'll work towards that, so that by the time the soil CRC finishes, we'll have a federation set up that will be open to federation members that go outside of the soil CRC. That's about the best I can say at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Next, we've got a couple of questions from Savannah. So the first question, which at the end of the session, Peter, could you please walk through again how to access soil data on the portal, filter for soil carbon and download the data available? We might come to that if we've got time at the end, Savannah. Otherwise, I'd suggest that you'll be able to review this webinar after the fact. You can watch the recording back and go through it then. But Savannah's also asked, Brian, is there a way to download data for more than one site at a time on eSPADE?
Yes, there is. Basically, when you go into the soil profile information, there is a search mechanism, and you can specify things like area, you can specify things like soil landscape. So there's definitely a mechanism for downloading more than one profile at a time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. Lisa has asked another question, which is how can you incorporate land management data with the soil data?
So one of the the ways we've made available is we've gone through and we've added the land and soil capability to the soil landscape polygons. So we've tried to link it so that we make the soil landscape units management units, and also for some areas which isn't available on eSPADE yet, we've actually gone down to landform elements. So we've mapped down to things like crests, side slopes, and things like that within soil landscapes. And we find the land and soil capability works really well at that level. And so we're trying to link it, and we have made it available at the landscape level. We hope to make it in selected areas, because we can't do the whole state at the landform element level, but we hope to make that available for selected areas in the future. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
I can unmute you, Lisa, once I find your name in the extensive list. You're unmuted, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. I think so. I suppose I was thinking more along the lines of what Peter was doing with the Corangamite, which was showing the soil property results. But I just wondered if it was also integrated with the actual management of those monitoring sites, so that people could understand what the consequences were of managing their soil a certain way, and what the benefits were or not of doing that. So I just wondered how much that's integrated. You showed the map showing the soil properties, but I just wondered if the management was also part of that, if you could see the way the land was managed under that, at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most common question we get, Lisa. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do here is to work out a value proposition. You know, why would you bother? Why would you bother loading up your soil? Why would you bother using the system? You know, how's it going to help you put more dollars in your wallet? You know, it's the most common question. And so following through from treatment to outcome is something that we have to address. And so we've had a fight within the soil CRC, because this sits under a program called soil metrics. And so there's the researchers are really interested in the soil metrics. The people who want to use the data are really interested in the outcomes, you know, the pragmatics. And so this third stage, we're introducing a new concept of having a community of practice. The community of practice initially starts with some of our, most active members. So Southern Farming Systems, Birchip Cropping Group, Riverine Plains, West Midlands Group in WA, you know, the cane growers, Burdekin up in Queensland and so on. And trying to work out some use cases for them, so that we can, you know, make a better proposition for them, value proposition for them in using these data. It's become apparent to us that we're going to have to put in the paddock management and the soil management, the farm management data. We're not sure yet whether that'll go into VAS or whether it'll go into another system like AgriFed, which is an NCRIS funded system that we're built, and then we just link them across, you know. So we're not 100% sure yet how we're going to do it. But yes, I agree that without that, I think we'll fail to make it we'll fail to meet the value proposition that's required to make it enduring.
Yeah, I think it's quite a difficult one, because I've been looking at a lot of different databases, mainly in the UK, and they all have great maps on soil properties, but the management layer is often missing. You might get land use, but that's just through satellite imagery, guessing what the land use is, I think. So I was quite interested in Brian's, because at least Jenkins is that they at least had some the land use there as a layer, because often it's not a real layer, it's just the satellite imagery, and not much more often.
Yeah, so I think I really admire what Peter and the CRC are trying to do and trying to get to that information that you really want, Lisa. But the problem is that when you're getting down to that level, it's really site specific, and then to get any sort of coverage for the information that's site specific, where you're collecting information on ground is so hard to do. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of money. So unless you can use satellite information, I think it's really hard to do. And I'm really going to be interested to see what Peter and the CRC come up with in that third stage.
Me too.
No pressure.
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thank you.
That's great conversation. Awesome. I'll just note as well that Linda Henderson has posted in the chat regarding uploading data that eDirt is the online tool for providing soil data to eSPADE. Next question we've got from Mohammed Khan. And Mohammed, I've unmuted you. If you'd like to unmute yourself and speak to that question. Mohammed has said, "Hi everyone, great talk. Just want to add here that the project should continue to validate and compensate the temporal changes in soil properties." Mohammed's also gone on to say, one more question, how was it ensured that the data is good enough to be used for the system? So feel free to unmute yourself and speak to that if you'd like, Mohammed. Otherwise, someone might have a go at answering the questions. Do you want to have a go, Peter or BJ?
Yeah, I'll have a crack. So from the VAS point of view, I agree 100% that when we went out to ask the farmers, we went out, in the first phase and visited everyone where they are and said, what do you want to get out of the system? Now, most of them said what they really wanted was an online supported soil data management system that allowed them to manage their data and, find gaps in the data and go for funding grants and all that sort of stuff, give their members education and so on. But in that, the biggest thing they really liked were two things. One was trend over time. How are we going? How are we traveling over time? Can I see the trends over time? And the second one was benchmarking. How am I comparing to others in these same soil types? And, how am I stacking up against the neighbours or against others in different regions, or around the world even, in different soil types. So they're huge on our list of data. So the trends over time are really only available where we've got data that is repeated sampling, and that's rare. It is rare. It's remarkably rare. So we don't have a lot of it, but where we do, we can show it with the graphs. In terms of the data quality and how do we ensure the data quality, look, there are checks we put into the system. So when people load up in the self-serve system, and let's say, for example, they load up data and it turned out that they've got, a pH of 50 instead of 5, that'll show up in the system and we'll go back to them and say, I think you need to correct your data and so on. Otherwise, because it's their data and it's their quality, it depends on the labs they've used and how the data was sampled and all that sort of thing. We don't really have a lot of control over that. So it's their data, they set the rules, they own it, and that's the best we can do. We do map it, of course, to the international standards, and so that makes it useful, but whether the data's, got veracity or not is not really something we know. We just have to take it as it comes.
Can I just pick up on something that you've said, Peter, which I think is a really interesting point, talking about that repeat sampling of soils data and that sort of longitudinal component, and it's really lacking from soil data. Like most data is a single point in time, and rarely, if ever, have we gone back and we've done monitoring where we've got repeats over time. And I really do think for all of us right across Australia that is a real hole in soil data.
Thanks, Brian. The next question, which I guess maybe the second half of this is semi-connected to what's just been said. This comes from Elizabeth King. I'll unmute you, Elizabeth, if you'd like to talk to it, but I'll read out the question as well. Elizabeth has asked, are there any further updates from the Commonwealth regarding sharing of soil carbon data from ERF projects? What quality assurance process for checking/cleaning the data should occur before the data is loaded into ANSYS or other data systems? So you are unmuted, Elizabeth, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, not much else to add to that. Just interested, I know there was a call for sharing some of that sampling. And I suppose the other sampling that's underway are projects that have been funded to try and reduce the cost of soil carbon sampling. And so I don't know if there's any movement there to share some of that data.
So Brian probably knows more about this than I do, but you know, we do sort of meet with the Commonwealth people every so often to hear what they've got to say about stuff. So the programs that they ran, you know, which were the programs for the soil monitoring, like the new soil data collection, on the basis that, you know, they subsidise your soil testing if you loaded it up to ANSYS. And the other one, which was the payment for historical soil data, both of those have now ceased, and they weren't terribly successful. They weren't terribly successful because effectively, you know, you had to go through a broker, and it was sort of complicated, and also the data agreements that they had, frightened people off, I think. That's my impression, but Brian might have a different idea. The second part of that is that, you know, more and more what we're seeing in the head agreements, when you get funded through either GRDC or you get funded through, you know, National Heritage Trust or NLP or one of those things to collect data, more and more they're putting into those agreements that these data must be made available. So the data I showed you from the Corangamite CMA was in that category. All that data was funded with Commonwealth funding, dispersed through the CMA, but they took the meaning of these data shall be made available and said, okay, we're going to make that publicly available. And that's why they've agreed to show it. And we'll see that more and more with the agreements. You know, GRDC have been working with us on this too, saying that they want to see the data go into a system somewhere. And so I think we'll see it eventually come out. But at the moment, I'm not 100% sure of what the current status is, but Brian might know.
Did you want to comment on that at all, Brian?
Yeah, I'm talking to myself, Blake. I had the mute on, sorry. Yeah, it's interesting with the Commonwealth projects and money, and I think it's a good way to go. I think you need to ask people before you do the work if you can make the data publicly available, because it's really hard to get people to accept it post the project. So you need to put that up front if you're going to get you know, some sort of benefit from the projects. You have to agree to make data publicly available. I think the problem we're facing now, if you were to just ask a farmer that and just get them to, you know, acknowledge it with a you know, plain English sort of signature, it's not a problem. But these days, when the lawyers get involved and you've got documentation with legalese in it, people look at it and say, I don't understand it, so I'm not signing it. So we've got to come to some sort of place where people can feel comfortable to make their data publicly available and sign off on it, and it has to be done before the project is initiated, not afterwards. We have an arrangement at the moment through the National Soil Action Plan. We're getting money from the feds, most of the state agencies are, and we're getting money to uplift our SALIS to the cloud which is hopefully going to make it more robust and more user-friendly for us as far as we're concerned, and therefore more user-friendly for the general public. We're also getting money to update eDirt, which is the data entry tool. It's HTML5 application, and it captures the soil profile information as stated. But it's a bit hit and miss using it in the field, which is not good for a soil data entry system. So we're going to turn it into an app, which is hopefully going to make it much easier to use in the field. So that's also with Commonwealth money. And part of the arrangements Commonwealth have for us is any data that we generate into the future gets made, public available to the Commonwealth. We did have a few sticking points, and we do have, as Peter does, we have confidential information, and we're not going to make that available because we feel that breaches our obligations. But data that is being given to us and people have acknowledged can be made publicly available, that's not a problem. So there is ways and means. There is money available for data at the moment. I think one of the biggest problems is, I think, what Peter's and the CRC are doing is wonderful, but funding ends in 2027, I think, Peter, and we really need to see that continue on. I think I'm rambling off the topic now, though.
No, that's good, Brian. Thanks very much. We will move on to the next question, which is from Marl Caddy, which I'm going to assume is a typo, and it's actually Mark Caddy. So, Mark, I'll unmute you. But Mark's question is, what can a land manager do if there is no soils data for their property? You have been unmuted. Mark, you'll have to unmute yourself as well. But Brian or Peter, feel free to have a go.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Gotcha, Mark.
So imagine if you were a landowner and you looked at the map and you couldn't find a dot or a polygon across your property. What are your options to add some data?
So if I'll have a go first, Peter, if that's all right. So on our system, we have statewide maps for a number of things, including soil landscape. So you can go in there and see a soil landscape, and you can look and see, where in that soil landscape your property would occur relative to the cross section. But once again, these are statewide maps. So and the polygons are still fairly broad. So they're indicative. They're probably going to tell you what's happening in your place, but you wouldn't want to base a development without site assessment. So a lot of this stuff is, because it is fairly broad, is going to be indicative, not prescriptive. But there is information
there. And of course, there's information at the national level for everyone, which is the Soil and Landscape Grid of Australia. It's pretty coarse, right? But there is data. There's also soil moisture data in things like the SMIPS and the Aura-L data for all of Australia on a daily basis, in fact. So, there's lots of information. I usually say to people when I'm out, for any spot, anywhere I talk anyway, I reckon you could easily find a couple of thousand data sets for any spot on Earth, really. And most of it's remotely sensed data, or data collected by sensors, or proximal data, or modeled data. To get data that's, high quality data, paddock scale data, I've just had a couple of PhD students working on this. It's quite tricky, because you need to have good quality of good volume, good volume of good quality data, and that doesn't exist everywhere. We're doing a rangeland carbon project at the moment, for example, and in the rangelands, boy, there's hardly any data at all. So a lot of it's just using remote sensing and other tools to do the best we can. But data does exist. It's very coarse, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, scale is king, isn't it, Peter? Like you can say you've got good data at a scale of 1 to 500,000. Do you have it at 1 to 250,000? Do you have it at 1 to 100,000? And then coming down, do you have good data at paddock scale? I'd suggest you've got good data, or reasonably good data, at 1 to 500,000 across, you know, much of the arable land. But when you come down to paddock scale, it's a lot rarer.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark and Peter and Brian. Next question is from Lara. So Lara, I'll do the same thing. I've unmuted you, but if you'd like to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself. Lara's asked, are there any options to export and use this data in a shapefile for geospatial analysis?
Do you want to? I'll have a go at that one. Yeah. So for you know, in our system, if you go to seed, most of, I think just about all our data sets are downloadable. So all the polygon data and line work is downloadable as was it KMLs or what do we call them? Yeah, bit of a mental blank there, but you can download the line work. You can download the line work, and you can even download the soil data points.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Our next question comes from Felicity, and maybe Linda, you'd like to have a go at answering this. Which soil parameters should we look at to help inform soil carbon management available on eSPADE, e.g. clay percentage, CEC, identifying soil constraints which may impede soil carbon improvements? You'll have to unmute yourself if you'd like to go, Linda, and all yours.
Great. Yeah, so yeah, clay percentage, well, that's well known. It's used in models. It's has quite a high level of prediction for soil carbon, but there's certainly a lot of other issues, and some of them are around the behaviour of soils. So things like pH constraints, for example, and that's certainly information that's findable on eSPADE in the reports, and it's on basically in the on the soil profile information tells you pH constraints. And that's obviously going to affect the amount of carbon that you can sequester. Erosion, erodibility of soil types, things like salinity and acidicity, they're all going to impact the productivity of your soils.
Great, thanks, Linda. That's it for the questions at the moment. So Felicity, do you have any final comments you'd like to make before the end of the webinar?
Thank you, Blake. I would just like to say a very big thank you to you for hosting, and to SNOC for hosting this webinar, and to Brian and Peter and Linda for sharing your expertise on accessing soil data. We will produce a fact sheet on this topic and add some of those additional comments and questions into the fact sheet, which will be available. The next SNOC webinar will be following on from this topic, and so what we'll look at is that Peter and Brian and Linda have spoken about what data is available, and so on the 15th of August we'll cover interpreting that soil data to optimise soil carbon management, and that will be with Carl Anderson, who's the Research Officer for Soil Carbon with New South Wales DPI, and he'll be supported by Brian Murphy from the Soil Knowledge Network. So some of those things that Linda mentioned around clay percentage and pH and salinity and sodicity, we'll take a deep dive into those and look at some of what are the constraints and the levers that may impede soil carbon management and impede soil carbon improvement. So we'll look at the factors above and below ground impacting soil carbon management, interpreting the soil data to assess land suitability for increasing soil carbon, and identifying opportunities for additional land management practices to optimise soil carbon. And I guess just addressing Lisa's earlier questions around land management, we will address in future webinars and discuss land management practices which will influence soil carbon, and look at some case studies and research that's been done on different land management practices that will influence soil carbon improvements. But thank you, Blake, and thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks, Felicity, and thanks to Brian, Peter, and Linda as well for the awesome presentation and awesome participation in that pretty marathon question session. Just before we go, I'll just remind everyone that a recorded version of this webinar will be available to everyone who registered for it, so you'll be able to go back and review things as you like. And upon close of this webinar, there'll be a brief survey. If you don't mind filling that out, that's really valuable information for all of us. Aside from that, look forward to seeing you at next month's SNOC. Thanks, everyone.